Hey folks, Will Brink here, brinkzone.com. Video I wanted to do was a follow-up long-term living with the ATC SCM 19s, which is that guy right there over my shoulder, as you can see. I did a video comparing the 19s to the 11s, sort of initial impressions and differences, and they'll link that in this video if you want to check that out so you know where I'm coming from. So, I mean, a lot of reviewers, of course, don't have a long time to spend with a component or a speaker. Sometimes it's, weeks, and understandably, because, of course, the company that, they're reviewing for or whatever, they can't sit there in their space for, months or years or what have you. And so understandably, when they're reviewing something, they have to get their initial impression and, make their notes and do the best they can. And sometimes, I think they do a great job. I think the other thing that, of course, a lot of times they're not able to do, sometimes they are, but a lot of times they aren't, understandably, is really give their long-term impressions, let's say 1 year impression, which are, living with, the component or the speaker. So what I wanted to do was a follow-up to give those impressions with some additional topics that I didn't really cover in the last one. And will lead into that, that 1 year. So it's been about a year since I purchased these ATC SCM 19s. And like I said, I'm going to go down a couple of initial and additional thoughts on them as to where I stand after basically a year of living with them, and hit a couple of points. So after about a year now, I mean, my impression of them now is very similar to what it was after that review, in terms of their strengths and their weak points, or really only one weak point, frankly, which I'll get to in a moment. But I think there's a lot of maybe some missed opportunities in reviewing these speakers that I and others who have reviewed them maybe not touched on. So I'm going to try to hit a couple of points about them that I think maybe hasn't really been touched on, and give my a wrap up. So one of them would be, as I've gotten older, my listening style, the way I like to listen to music, has changed. I wouldn't actually say that the type of music I listen to has actually changed all that much through my life, frankly. I still just have a very broad interest in a wide variety of music. So that hasn't changed that much. But the way I listen to music has changed, and I think that happens to all of us, most, as we listen to music through the years, and maybe we change listening spaces, maybe as we change gear, and just, how we come to enjoy our music. And I would say that I was younger, like a lot of people, I'd like to crank up the music, and regardless of the type of music. And I would, if I came home and there was nobody around, or, came back from class or came back from work, if I was given the opportunity, I wanted to put some music on and crank it up. And I think there's, to that point, as I've gotten older, the type of music may not have changed that much, but the way I like to listen to music has. And I would say that I have sometimes, certainly if the mood strikes me, I want to crank up the music, as I always did. But more likely than not, I like to listen to what I would call a moderate listening volume, where I feel like I'm really getting the most from the music, the room, the equipment, without it, sounding not harsh. I mean, again, good equipment, good speakers, whatever, you can push the SPL way up there. But I find that I definitely attracted to more sitting in that sweet spot, whatever that may be, and listening to a more moderate volume. And to that point, I tend to gravitate, I think, more towards speakers that sound good at moderate volumes. I would say that a lot of speakers will sound good cranked up. And there's really a much reduced choice of speakers to listen to purchase that will sound really satisfying and dynamic and good to your ears at a listening volume. And I would have to say that I'm going to give the poster child brand for that, in my view, would be B&W. I've had 3 pairs of B&Ws over the years. I've had Signature 805s, which were were great speakers. I had 803D V2s, I believe. These were big floor standers. And I had PM1s, which were, when I moved, I didn't want to bring the big B&Ws with me, and I had a much smaller house and all that. So I actually grabbed a pair of PM1s with a sub. And so I've had 3 different pairs of B&Ws, and I've heard obviously lots of others. But and this is generally a well-known fact about B&Ws among people who listen to B&Ws, is that they don't sound great. They don't really come into their own until you really turn them up and get some juice into them. And that's not because they're so inefficient. They're not rated as terribly inefficient speakers, but they really don't seem to come to life until you really get some juice into them. And I think that's a pretty well established reality of B&Ws. And there's other brands for sure, but I just think that one tends to be sort of the poster child for that effect that most people know. And I really find myself gravitating towards speakers, like I say, that I not just sound good at higher volumes in SPL when I want to crank it up, but also sound really good at moderate listening volumes. And there's not that many speakers that do that well. To that point, the ATCs, both the 11s that I had and the 19s, are absolutely amazing in that respect. I don't actually find myself wanting to or needing to turn them up louder to really get a satisfying experience from them. I find that now by moderate listening volumes, I would say at a volume that you can still actually have a conversation with somebody. Maybe you have to raise your voice a little, but you can still talk to somebody while you're listening to music or not. And I actually find that I will listen to the 19s at a moderate listening volume continuously without a real need or want to turn them up. And they just sound phenomenal at moderate listening volumes. That is really a strong point of these speakers. They don't just sound great, like I say, if you look at their power capability, handling capability, it's actually quite high. So I would give that one really strong point about the SCM 19s and 11s. I'm not going to go outside those 2 models because I haven't experienced outside those models. But I think ATCs, again, sort of have a reputation for it, but let's stick to what we know. But I didn't mention that before. I think, again, if that's one thing that you care about, I think that's, again, that narrows this particular model or the 11s for you down to that model versus something else. A lot of times people have asked me, how do they compare to X or Y or whatever in the similar price range? And I think if you're somebody who doesn't always just want to crank up the volume and wants that sounds really satisfying and good and dynamic and not thin or flat at lower volumes, the SCM 19s are an easy one. So this is I actually have some notes. So hopefully you guys don't hold it against me that I actually have to check up my notes a little bit here. Types of music, the types of music that you're going to listen to with these speakers, and this is a topic that has to go a little outside of the SCMs, but I think it really doesn't get enough discussion. And the only negative that you could ever really give these SCM that everybody's ever complained about is the bass is cuts off at around 50 hertz. It's a little like 52, but let's just call it 50 hertz. And some people complain that the bass is a little thin, and I think that's a fair criticism to an extent. But you have to understand if you understand the design of these speakers, the intent of the speakers, the history, provenance of ATC, I think you'll understand better. And again, depending on the type of music that you listen to, will you again decide whether these are the right speakers for you. And what I mean by that is when you're dealing with two-way monitors, no matter how ingenious the design, the engineering, the materials used, and so forth, physics is physics. You cannot get away from the physics and the reality of a two-way monitor, which of course have their strengths and their negatives, and depends where those fall for you. But what I mean by that is you have a mid-bass driver. The mid-bass driver, obviously, hence the name, has to deal with the mids and the lower registers. And you can only push the crossover so far where the tweeter has to pick up some of that, and that depends on designs of tweeters and so forth. But at the end of the day, you are dealing with the physics of a mid-bass driver that is trying to do both, and choices have to be made. A designer has to decide, how far, with the size of the box, the size of the driver. These would be big. These would be definitely big. These are basically stand mounts. They technically, you might call them bookshelves, but I mean they're almost a 50-pound bookshelf. They're pretty big for a bookshelf. I would consider them really a stand mount, and I don't see anybody put them in a bookshelf. So the physics of it is that you have to decide how much of that driver you're going to try to capture the low end and the mids. But you have to make some decisions. That is, if you're trying to push that driver to go lower, you're going to have to give something up, and that is going to be the mids, because that driver, the mass of the driver, the speed of the driver, the size, it has to either deal with those lower hertz, or it's got to cover those higher registers in the mids, and you just can't do both, because the physics generally just does not allow it. So generally speaking, most designers, I think most speakers, are going to give up those mids for those lows. And they also know that the human ear and human beings generally will hear the highs and the lows first. This is going to be you're going to go to an audio store and sit down and listen, and the first thing that you're going to grab onto, your ear is going to hear. Most people that maybe are not as I don't want to say advanced is not the right word, have not extensive history of listening, critical listening, don't really tune into those mids as readily as they're going to highs and the lows. And so a monitor that's able to cover those highs and those lows, especially initially, is going to be attractive to people. And finally, I would also say that a lot of people may not have actually heard speakers that really do mids well. If you have not heard a speaker that really does mids well, you don't know what you're missing. And to be perfectly honest with you, I can name a bunch of speakers I've had that I think they did a commendable job, and these were not always two-way. Some of these times these were three-ways, and even 3.5s or 4. You don't always know what you're missing, and until you listen to a speaker that really does mids and does them well, i.e., just about anything ATC puts out, which is really their bread and butter, their focus. The founder of ATC, was known for feeling that a lot of the music that is important, that gets lost in other designs, and what he became known for was designing this outstanding mid driver, and then went on to design and build full speakers. But I don't think you completely know what you're missing at that point. And so back to the physics. What I'm saying is that you have to make a choice, and I think a choice was made with these speakers to, again, do what ATC is known for and really focus on those mids while developing or delivering a very tight, fast low end. The bass is very tight and very fast and can be satisfying, but it's not low. It's not going to, grab you. It's not going to make any, the house rattle. It's not going to do anything like that. And there's lots of monitors, obviously, that are rated two-way one rated 40 hertz, even in the 30s, which frankly, I've never heard a two-way monitor, in that size. We're not talking about big boxes. I mean, remember, we're talking, apples for apples here. We're talking, stand mount, bookshelf, whatever. We're not talking two-way monitors that have, let's say, they're ported, that are larger and can move a lot more air and all that. So I am trying to talk apples to apples here. So, give me a little leeway on that one. You could easily type out, you could type out some design or some brand, of course, that would not be accurate to what I'm saying or make me look bad. But you know what I'm trying to say here. So if you understand the design, you understand I think what I at least interpret as the mission from ATC and so forth, which is to bring a speaker that, again, delivers mids that you will really rarely hear ever in this price point, if not at far higher price points. I think you'll understand a bit better as to the design and the fact, like I say, no matter what company or anybody claims, when you're trying to make one driver, do cover the mids and the bass, you are going to have to give something up. You're going to have to make a choice, and generally that choice is to give people that lower end and give up some of those mids. If you understand, if you look at the driver too, the way the driver is designed. It's not coaxial in the classic sense because it shares the same magnet, but it is sort of a hybrid mid bass driver that does stress the mid delivery. So my point being is, I think that back to the type of music you listen to. If you listen to a lot of music that has a lot of like female vocals, piano, jazz, classical, that type of thing, the 19 is a fantastic speaker, and I don't think anybody will be unhappy with the 19. And I think again, you'll come to appreciate the mid level sound from those mid drivers and that mid focus of that mid bass that will make it really hard for you to honestly listen to anything else. However, if your style of music is rock, pop, house, stuff that's got a bass to it that is really needs to get into that lower hertz to sound good, then you're not going to be happy with the 19s. So what you would do, which is what I did, you would combine the 19 if you want the full spectrum to include. So if you're somebody like me who listens to a lot of different types of music, sometimes where it has that bass and you want that bass in there, you need to add a sub. Which is what I did. I have a Velodyne HDS 15 sub. It's an older sub, but one of the best subs ever made. Velodyne was really certainly in their time, right, the top handful of the best subs makers by far. When we're talking about good subs, we're talking about musical subs. We're talking about very fast subs, very accurate subs. We're not talking about home theater subs. Any sub can go boom, boom, thump, thump. I think, again, a lot of people don't like subs in their two-channel system because they really maybe have never heard a really good sub that is properly integrated with the two-channel system. So if you cannot put an inexpensive or just a cheap sub, home theater type sub with something as musical, as fast as something like these ATCs, you're going to have to combine it with a quality sub. And I would say you probably would need to put aside, I would say, about $2,000. I mean, I would not connect these ATCs up with anything that was, again, not on the higher, say, from REL, the higher end, better line of REL, certainly from Velodyne. There are a number of new companies, or not new, but there's more companies out there making good quality musical subs than there used to be. I would definitely say a sealed sub. That would be my choice. So if you combine the 19s with a good quality sub or two, and you properly set it up, now you have a really outstanding system all around. That is in my view, a giant killer for the sound. I mean, let's say you're looking at around $4,000 for the pair of those guys, give or take. And let's say you put $2,000 into a good quality sub, you're into the whole thing for $6,000, which is a lot of money to some, but obviously it's not a lot of money in the world of audiophiles. It's not a lot of money at all for good quality speakers. The B&W 803Ds I had were considerably more, and I will tell you that the 19s on a good stand with good gear with a sub, day and night compared to those B&W. I would not even consider those 803Ds compared to what I get from these SCM 19s with a good sub. And if I had more room, I would add a second sub. That will be my next purchase. But I'm going to have to move to a bigger space. The sound quality at that point, I would say, is with good, again, of course, with good associated gear. That should go without saying. But again, as you look at my other review of the SCM 19 and 11s, I'm not going to go too much in associated gear in terms of they're very, very resolving speakers. They are not forgiving of low quality masters. So, there's always a plus and a minus there. They are not, they're going to need to be connected to high quality associated gear. So, you're not going to connect them up to a, some inexpensive receiver with 50 watts a channel, and even imagine good, good audio coming out of these SCM 19s. So I think that's the one really important point I wanted to make in terms of where these speakers really excel and what their focus is, which is in the mids and the highs. And I didn't even get into the highs again. I covered that in the last one. The tweeter, again, is a specially designed tweeter. It's not your typical soft dome tweeter. You got to go look at the engineering of that. I'll link below some discussions and links to that. It's a bit different, but it is an outstanding tweeter. But I'm not going to say. I really wanted to focus in on what people maybe don't understand about the focus and of the design of the really what ATC has been known for, which is, mid drivers and mid-level sound. Dispersion characteristics, another thing I didn't mention, I just want to cover dispersion characteristics. Another thing that really impresses me about the ATC is the dispersion characteristics. Again, a lot of speakers can sound really satisfying and great when you're in that sweet spot, whatever that may be. But as soon as you go outside of the sweet spot, they drop off quickly. And the ATCs have, at least in my room, and I've also read from, seen other people's reviews, they always tend to comment on how impressive the dispersion characteristics are. And I would say that even if you're outside the sweet spot, the ATCs just sound phenomenal. Like they sound so good that even like if you're in another room completely, they still like sound great. You find yourself wanting to leave the bedroom or the bathroom and get back into that listening room fast as you can because they sound that good. Which I'm exaggerating in terms of that's not really off-axis dispersion, but you know what I'm trying to say. But the off-axis or the off the sweet spot dispersion quality is really outstanding. I find myself standing just about anywhere in the room. Sometimes I'm not sitting. I might walk up and stand sort of right, almost in a near field position, and they sound great there. I can go off to the left and right, and it doesn't really seem to matter with these speakers. And I'm not. Honestly, I'm not completely sure. It's a little above my pay grade, to be perfectly honest with you, to explain just how they pulled that off. But it is really impressive, I have to say. Finally, I want to talk about the grills a little bit because I don't think people have spoken about the grills other than visually. So let me grab these guys here. So there's the grill. So there you go. That's without the grill, and take a look at them. So now, so those are metal grills, and what I want to say about those metal grills is a couple of things. One, obviously, either like the way they look or that you don't. I think they look great. I've actually a speaker company that used to put metal grills on there, sort of similar to that, was ADS, and I loved ADS speakers, and that was my holy grail of speakers back in the day that I wanted to own back. This was 80s, 90s, and I never did get to own a pair of ADS. But one of the things I liked about the ADS speakers was those metal grills. One, of course, is the obvious. There's no little hands and animals and whatever. You don't have to worry about ever coming back to find one of your dust caps inverted. That's, I don't have any kids around and stuff. So to me, that's not a big deal. But to you, that's a big deal. I will tell you that if I came home to find my dust caps inverted, I would lose my mind. However, let's get to the important part, sonically. These are the first pair of speakers, and my reading is this was intentional on the part of ATC. This is the only pair of speakers I've ever owned, again, that I notice absolutely no difference with or without the grills on. I know that speakers are often designed to be played with or without the grills on. It's not usually, they will usually recommend it one way or the other. You will find that reviewers often will, review speakers with and without the grills on and say, I found these speakers sounded better with it or without, and so on and so forth. I cannot find any difference at all with or without the grills. And I used to, like not most, but many people, with critical listening, I usually tended to take the grills off if I was going to sit down and do some critical listening of any speaker I had. And I do not find myself doing that, nor need to, with these speakers. And I find that, and a lot of companies will claim, transparent grills, and it's not true. Well, in my experience, this is true. And I have not seen anybody mention that in their reviews of the SCM line. I can't speak for, outside the SCM line, but I've read, reviews of the 7s and the 11s and the 19s and the 40s and so forth, and I haven't seen anybody mention that. And again, that's a pretty impressive thing that they've done. And again, my reading is that was intentional on their part, and whether it's materials used, the shape of it, and so forth, I don't know, but I will say that if that matters to you and you don't want to have to care whether your grills are on or off, that's another real win for ATC and their grills. Like I say, obviously, looks-wise, I really like the way the speakers look. To me, visually, they capture almost a perfect blend of traditional and modern lines. I mean, you can see the you have to go look at other pictures. I'm not going to turn them around, but if you can see, there's not square boxes. They're a tapered cabinet, which according to them, at least, reduces cabinet resonance. my experience from the sound of it, it does. I mean, they are outstanding. And to finally conclude this, the next thing I would say is that in the price point, these are not inexpensive speakers, but they are not remotely expensive as speakers go. And what ATC has clearly done, I mean, I've seen some people complain or make comments about, the binding posts or something were not, up to spec for what they were expecting. I don't agree. What I think ATC has done and done brilliantly is really focused their attention on what really matters to the audio. That is the drivers. In these, I think what some companies will try to do is, again, find maybe a more of a balance in other areas, cosmetics and that type of thing. Whereas I think that ATC for this price point has done the right thing by really focusing on building probably certainly the best drivers in their category and then some, and not and obviously cabinets that do exactly what they're supposed to do. They don't resonate. Some people, again, have mentioned they're thin and don't have bracing, but my understanding is ATC tested them with and without bracing and, again, did not find any differences. And they're already almost 50 pounds. So I really think that ATC in this price point focused on exactly what they should have focused on. I don't mind, or certainly don't. I like, let's say, extra nice binding posts and additional doodads, but they don't have any effect on audio. No matter what anybody tells you, the binding posts are not going to alter the actual audio quality. They are perfectly good quality binding posts. They're not, cheapo quality and so forth. The crossovers are excellent quality. Internal wiring and so forth. Maybe they could use a little more padding inside, from what I saw. But again, from an audio perspective, I think that they focused on exactly what they should have for the price point, which was those drivers. And they are, like I say, top of the line. And I think those drivers put in those cabinets with that crossover and so forth really hits a sweet spot sonically that you're going to have a real difficult time matching in that price point, if not a whole lot higher, depending on what you want. Again, if you're looking for imaging and depth and clarity and smoothness and a really smooth high end versus maybe an etched high end that you can get with certain metallic tweeters, again, might make people unhappy, but beryllium and diamond and so forth, they have their own sound. I mean, they do. You either like it or you don't, but they do have their own sound. And I would say that when you're talking about these soft dome, silk dome tweeters, the way ATC has produced them, they don't have their own sound. They just don't have any sound, which is sort of what you want. And they don't roll off. That's obviously one of the reasons that silk dome tweeter and soft dome tweeters have their negatives. If you look at the way that ATC has designed these tweeters, you'll find that they don't have the usual drawbacks of a soft dome, silk dome tweeter. So, all right, I think that's everything I wanted to say. So living with the ATCs for almost a year now, I would add that they just continue to impress me, to blend beautifully with my equipment. The only thing I would see myself doing, honestly, would be going up to the 40s or even the active 40s. Honestly, that's really what I'd like to try someday. But I think the 40s would be the obvious change. And now you're going to a three-way and separating that mid bass from that bass driver. And that would be maybe my next adventure. But for now, if what I've said checks off the boxes for you, the way you listen to music, what you want from music, the ATCs to me are pretty much a no-brainer. If you don't want to add, if your style of music and what you listen to is going to be bass heavy stuff, and you don't want to either not have the room or don't want to spend the money on a good sub, I think there's probably better choices that are going to give you a wider range, probably make you happier. So look into those, and maybe I'll do a review on something else. So hopefully that is what you wanted to hear, and leave some comments, and see you all on the brink some.